The air was dry and cold on the moon of Caldris 7. Dust storms blew across the rocky surface, and the sky was always a dull shade of orange. This place had seen too many battles. Every hill, every crater, held broken machines and silent soldiers, who would never return home. Lieutenant Mark Trenner walked carefully across the rubble field. His boots crunched against shattered metal and scorched stone. He held his scanner in one hand and a pulse rifle in the other. He was searching for life signs. Somewhere nearby, a ship had gone down, a fast-moving Zentari starfighter, according to the command center. Mark was a combat engineer. He fixed broken machines, helped build defenses, and sometimes rescued people. Today, he wasn't sure what he would find. As he climbed a ridge, his scanner beeped softly. Life sign detected. Just one. He moved quickly, sliding down the slope to the crash site. The ship was small, shaped like a dagger, now twisted and half buried in the rock. Smoke rose from the engine, and a soft blue light blinked from the cockpit. Mark approached with caution. Zentari were not friendly. They were one of the most feared species in the galaxy. Tall, strong, and always wearing full-body armor. No one had ever seen one without it. Most people didn't even know what they looked like underneath. But war had changed everything. Hello? Mark called out, his voice calm but loud. Is anyone alive in there? A weak voice answered, crackling through his comm link. It wasn't in English, but the translator chip in his helmet made sense of it. Can't breathe, please. Mark stepped closer and peered inside the cockpit. A tall figure was slumped over the controls, body shaking slightly. The armor was cracked and burnt, with sparks jumping between the plates. The pilot's breathing was shallow and fast. The helmet was still sealed, but Mark could hear the panic in her voice. Please, remove armor. Mark hesitated. This was a Zentari, technically still an enemy. He should wait for backup. He should follow orders. But something in her voice made him pause. It wasn't pride or anger. It was fear. He climbed onto the side of the ship and used a tool from his belt to unlock the emergency panel. The suit's outer layer hissed and released a burst of steam. He found the main seal near the chest plate and pulled it open. It took strength and care. But finally, the top layer of the armor came loose. The figure inside gasped, air rushing into her lungs. She tilted her head back and Mark froze. Her face was nothing like he expected. She looked almost human. Not exactly, but close. Her skin had a soft violet tone, and her eyes were large and silver, glowing slightly. A ridge of small glass-like scales ran down her neck. Her hair, dark and braided, was stuck to her forehead with sweat. She was beautiful, but more than that, she looked real. Alive. Vulnerable. Mark reached for his water pack and handed it to her. She took it with shaking hands, drinking slowly. Thank you, she said in a tired voice. You're welcome, Mark replied, still stunned. Are you hurt? She nodded weakly. Leg, broken, chest hurts, armor, trapped me. Too tight. He looked down. The lower half of her armor was still locked in place. He could see where the metal had bent inward from the crash, pressing hard against her side. It must have been crushing her with every breath. I need to get you out of this, Mark said. Hold still. She didn't fight him. In fact, she closed her eyes and let her head fall back against the seat. One by one, Mark opened the locks and lifted away the armor plates. Beneath it, she wore a thin bodysuit, torn in several places. There were bruises along her ribs and a bleeding cut on her hip. He cleaned the wound quickly and wrapped it with a med band. As he worked, she opened her eyes again. You're human, she said quietly. Yeah, Mark said. Lieutenant Mark Trenner, Earth Alliance. I'm Varaya, commander of the Centauri 4th Fleet. They looked at each other for a moment. Just two soldiers who had spent years thinking the other was a monster. I should hate you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I should be arresting you, Mark replied. But neither of them moved. Instead, Mark sat back on a rock and pulled out a ration bar. He broke it in half and offered her a piece. Viraya looked at it, unsure, then took it and chewed slowly. They ate in silence, the wind howling softly around them. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know," Mark admitted. "I could call for help, but they might not help you. I would be taken, questioned, maybe worse." He nodded. "I can't walk far," she added. "My leg? I'll help you," Mark said, almost without thinking. She looked at him with wide eyes. "Why?" "Because you asked me to help you breathe," he said. "And because I've seen enough death. Maybe it's time someone tried something different." Viraya didn't smile, but her eyes softened. She lowered her head, resting it gently against the inner wall of the ship. Mark stood up and checked the sky. Enemy drones could appear at any moment. He had to move fast. "We can hide in the caves north of here," he said. "There's a place I use during recon missions. Safe for now. I trust you," she said simply. Mark blinked in surprise. A Zentari trusting a human? That was something no one would believe. He helped her up, letting her lean on him as they left the wreck behind. The broken ship crackled softly in the distance as they walked together, step by careful step across the cold rocks of Couldnt 7. Above them, the stars began to shine. And for the first time in a long while, Mark Trenner felt hope. The path to the cave was long and difficult. Mark held Viraya's arm around his shoulders as they walked across the cracked surface of Couldnt 7. Her steps were weak, her body still recovering from the crash. The Zentari armor she once wore was, now in pieces, left behind with the wrecked ship. Without the armor, she seemed smaller, less like a soldier and more like a person. Mark noticed that she didn't speak much, but when she did, her voice was calm, thoughtful, and sometimes full of questions. "Why are humans still fighting?" she asked as they moved past a burned-out vehicle. Mark paused. "Because we're afraid and sometimes we don't know how to stop." She looked at him. "I was taught humans are dangerous, unpredictable, emotional." Mark smiled a little. "All true, but that doesn't mean we're all bad." The cave came into view just as the sky turned dark. It was hidden behind a wall of sharp rocks. Mark had used it before during a scouting mission. Inside it was cool and dry. A small energy lamp provided light. There were a few supplies, blankets, rations, and a medical kit. He helped Viraya lie down on a folded blanket. Her face showed signs of pain, but she didn't complain. "You need rest," Mark said. "I need answers," she replied. He sat down beside her, resting his rifle against the wall. "Why did you help me?" she asked again. Mark looked down at his hands. "Because you were scared. Because you asked. I didn't see an enemy in that moment. I just saw someone who needed help." Viraya was silent for a moment. Then she asked, "Do you think peace is possible?" Mark raised his eyebrows. "Between humans and Zentari?" She nodded. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know war hasn't solved anything." She stared at the ceiling of the cave. "I used to believe my armor made me strong. Now I wonder if it only kept me from feeling anything." Mark didn't answer right away. He watched her eyes, the way they shimmered in the light, and saw something in them he hadn't seen in a long time. Doubt, yes, but also courage. "You're stronger now than you were in that armor," he said softly. Viraya blinked but didn't reply. That night they slept with one ear open. The war hadn't stopped just because two soldiers shared a cave. Outside, the sky rumbled with distant fire, and ships flew overhead like silent ghosts. The next morning, Mark checked the scanner. Something was wrong. "There's a signal," he said. "A beacon. It's faint but active. Your ship must have sent it before it died." Viraya sat up quickly. "That means others are coming. Maybe even a retrieval squad." Mark frowned. "We have to move." "But I can't run," Viraya said, gripping her leg. "Then I'll carry you," Mark said without thinking. Before she could answer, the scanner beeped again. This time, it was louder. "Too late," Mark muttered. "They're already close." He grabbed his rifle and peeked out from the cave entrance. 3 figures moved quickly across the rocks, tall, armored, and armed. Zentari soldiers. Mark knew right away that they were here for Varaya. But would they rescue her or punish her? Varaya saw the shapes and her eyes widened. They're from my unit. They'll think I turned. They might not listen. Mark's grip on the rifle tightened. We hold the high ground here. I'll try to talk first. No. They won't talk. Not to a human. Before he could say more, the first soldier shouted something in the Zentari tongue. The voice was sharp and angry. Mark stepped out with his hands up, the rifle slung behind him. Don't shoot. She's injured. She needs help. The soldiers didn't pause. They raised their weapons. A blast of energy shot past Mark, burning the rock beside him. He dove back into the cave. They're not here to rescue. They're here to silence you. Varaya gritted her teeth. Then I'll help. Defend us. You can't even stand. Then I'll crawl, she said, dragging herself beside him. The two of them worked together. Mark handed her a small pulse pistol from his pack. She checked it like a professional, fast and precise. Even hurt, she moved with the grace of a trained soldier. The firefight began. The first Zentari entered the cave mouth, but Mark was faster. One shot hit the enemy's shoulder, spinning him backward. The second soldier ducked and fired, but Varaya shot back with perfect aim, hitting the attacker's leg. It didn't last long. The third soldier retreated when he saw the others fall. Mark and Varaya sat in silence, breathing hard. I didn't want this, Varaya said. I never wanted to fight my own people. Mark nodded. Maybe it's time we stop being what they trained us to be. Later, as they patched each other's wounds, Varaya asked, Do you think your people will treat me the same? Mark hesitated. They'll be suspicious, but I'll protect you, I promise. You would protect an enemy? You're not the enemy anymore. Varaya lowered her head. I don't know where I belong now. With people who see you, not just the armor you wore, Mark replied. For the first time, Varaya smiled. A soft, small smile, but real. The next day they prepared to travel again. We can reach a neutral research station in 2 days, Mark said. They might give us shelter. Varaya nodded. Then let's go, before more come. As they walked away from the cave, limping, supporting each other, Varaya whispered, When I was in the armor, I felt safe, but I also felt alone. Now I feel pain, but not loneliness. Mark looked at her. That's because you're not alone anymore. They moved forward under a sky full of stars and warships, and yet for the first time they believed that maybe, just maybe, something better was possible. The desert plains of Couldnt 7 stretched out under a wide sky, full of floating ash and quiet winds. Varaya walked slowly beside Mark, leaning on a makeshift crutch he had built for her. Her leg was still healing, and every step was painful, but she kept moving. Mark walked close to her, carrying his scanner and watching the horizon. He had set the scanner to alert him if any drones, soldiers, or ships got near. We're halfway to the neutral zone, he said. If we can make it there, they can send out a shuttle. Varaya nodded. That's the research station? Yes. It doesn't belong to either side. Scientists from many species work there. They don't care about the war. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, What if your people find us before we get there? Mark didn't answer right away. He was thinking the same thing. The Earth Alliance would not be happy to find him traveling with a Zentari, especially one without her armor. They would call him a traitor, maybe even arrest him. But he had made his choice. I'll protect you, he finally said. Whatever happens. She looked at him with soft silver eyes. You keep saying that. I mean it. They continued, walking in silence until they reached a small canyon. The path was narrow, with high rock walls on both sides. Mark paused. We need to be careful here. It's a good place for an ambush. Varaya looked around. I agree. I would have set traps here if I were hunting. They moved slowly, step by step, weapons ready. Suddenly, the scanner beeped. Someone's here, Mark said. A voice shouted from above. Drop your weapons. This is Earth Alliance Recon Unit Gamma 2. Mark stepped in front of Viewership, raising his hands. Don't shoot. I'm Lieutenant Mark Trenner. There was silence for a moment. Then a soldier peeked over the edge of the canyon. His face showed surprise. Trenner, we thought you were dead. I'm alive, Mark said. But I need help. She's with me. He motioned to Viewership, who stood still, her eyes watching the soldiers above. Another voice replied, sharp and suspicious. Is that a Zentari? She's not a threat, Mark said. She's injured. I saved her. She's the enemy. Mark took a deep breath. She saved my life too. She chose not to kill me when she had the chance. There was another pause. Then a group of 4 soldiers climbed down into the canyon, their rifles pointed at Viewership. One of them stepped forward. Orders are to capture or kill any Zentari on sight. No, Mark said firmly. She's under my protection. The lead soldier looked at Mark. You're not in command here. I'm still a lieutenant. You've been missing for 3 days. That makes you unreliable. Viewership stayed quiet, her back straight, but Mark could see the worry in her eyes. Let us take her in, the soldier continued. She'll be questioned, maybe exchanged for prisoners. You know what that really means, Mark said. She won't survive the trip. The soldier sighed. Then you're forcing me to report you. Go ahead, Mark said, but I won't let you hurt her. The soldiers stared at him in disbelief. One of them muttered, He's lost it. Another raised his weapon, aiming at Viewership. She didn't move. Mark raised his rifle in return. Lower it. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. The wind blew dust across their faces. Then finally, the lead soldier lowered his weapon. This is a bad idea, he said, but I don't want to start a fight here. Good, Marky replied. Then let us go. The soldiers backed off, but their eyes stayed sharp. Mark helped Viewership climb the other side of the canyon. The moment they reached the top, she let out a breath. Thank you, she said quietly. Mark nodded. We're not safe yet. Let's keep moving. That night, they found shelter under an old satellite dish. The base of it was broken, but the metal blocked the cold wind. Mark lit a small heat lamp and gave Viewership half a ration bar. You didn't have to stand up for me, she said as they ate. I wanted to. You were ready to fight your own people. Mark looked at her. Because they couldn't see what I see. And what do you see? He paused. I see someone strong, not just in battle. You didn't run from your people, you faced them, you didn't give in to fear. Viewership looked into the firelight. When I wore my armor, I didn't feel anything. No fear, no pain, no confusion. Now I feel everything, it's hard. That means you're alive, Mark said. Really alive. She turned to him, her voice soft. When you removed my armor, I thought I would die. I couldn't breathe, but now I feel like I'm finally breathing for the first time. Mark said nothing. He just smiled and looked up at the stars. Do you think the war will end? She asked. Someday, he said. Maybe because of people like us. By morning, they reached the outer edge of the neutral zone. The station was visible on the horizon, a smooth silver dome shining under the rising sun. But a problem waited ahead. A small Zentari scout ship had landed near the path. Viewership's face turned pale. They're from my side. They'll see me with you and think I've betrayed them. Mark lifted his scanner. 2 life forms, probably officers. We need to avoid them, she said. But it was too late. One of the Zentari spotted them and raised a weapon. Viewership raised her hands. Wait, it's me, Commander Viewership. The officer paused, confused. You're alive? Yes. But I'm no longer part of the war. The second Zentari stepped forward. You're walking with a human, where is your armor? I left it behind, she said. I've seen the truth. We are fighting without understanding each other. You sound weak, the officer said. That human poisoned your mind. Mark stood beside her. She saved me, more than once. The officers raised their weapons. You are no longer one of us. Mark stepped in front of her again. Then you'll have to go through me. The standoff grew tense. but a drone from the research station suddenly flew overhead and projected a message. This is neutral territory. Any violence will be recorded and punished. The Centauri officers looked up at the drone, then back. At Mark and Varela, they turned and walked away. Mark let out a deep breath. We made it. They walked the last few steps together. As the station doors opened, Varela whispered, "You stood between me and death." Again. Mark looked at her gently. "Because I believe in you. Not the armor, not the uniform, just you." And for the first time, she let herself smile, not just a small one, but full and warm. They entered the station, no longer enemies, but something much more powerful. Allies, maybe even friends. The research station was quiet. Built under the surface of Couldnt 7, the silver dome protected its people from the war outside. Scientists, doctors, and diplomats from different species moved through the halls, all focused on peace, not violence. Mark and Varela walked side by side through a long glass corridor. Outside, the stormy red desert of Couldnt stretched as far as they could see. "It feels strange to be safe," Varela said softly. Mark nodded. "I don't think I've felt safe in years." They passed a group of researchers who stared at Varela with surprise. Some whispered. Others looked nervous. "They're afraid of me," she said. "They're afraid of what you used to be," Mark replied. "But they'll see who you really are, just give it time." They were taken to a small guest room. Inside were 2 beds, a desk, and a window looking out at the stars. It wasn't much, but after sleeping in caves and deserts, it felt like a luxury. As Varela sat on one of the beds, a tall human woman entered. Her uniform had no weapons, just a symbol of peace on her shoulder. "I'm Dr. Lee," she said with a kind smile. "You must be Varela. We've heard a lot about you." Varela stood slowly. "Good things or bad?" "A little of both," Dr. Lee said, still smiling. "But I prefer to hear the truth from the person herself." Varela glanced at Mark, who gave her a small nod. "I want peace," she said. "I don't want to fight anymore." Dr. Lee's eyes softened. "Then you're welcome here, both of you." Over the next few days, Mark and Varela were given food, clothes, and time to rest. Doctors treated Varela's wounds, and she started walking without the crutch. Her body healed faster than Mark expected, but it was her mind and heart that were changing most of all. She spent hours reading human history in the station's library. She studied war records, peace treaties, and even human art. One night, she asked Mark a quiet question. "Why do humans create music when the world is so full of noise?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe because music gives shape to feelings. Some things can't be said with words." She listened to one of his old recordings, an ancient Earth piano song, and didn't speak until it ended. "It makes my chest feel heavy, but in a good way." "That's called emotion," he said with a smile. "You're getting used to it." One morning, Varela stood in front of a mirror wearing a simple blue jumpsuit, far from her old Centauri armor. She touched the soft fabric and stared at her reflection. Mark entered the room and paused. "You look different," he said. "I feel different," she replied. "Without the armor, I can feel the air on my skin. I can feel the weight of my body. I can feel life." He walked closer. "Do you miss it?" "Sometimes. It made everything simple. But now, I think I'm ready to live without it." She turned to face him. "Do you think I'll ever be accepted?" "By your people?" Mark looked into her eyes. "You already are. By me." They stood in silence, not needing to say more. Later, that day, a message came through the station's comm system, an emergency signal. A battle had started in orbit above Couldnt. Both human and Centauri ships were fighting. One of the human transports was shot down and its distress beacon was close, too close. Mark checked the map and froze. "It crashed just outside the neutral zone," he said. "If we don't help them, they won't survive." Dr. Lee frowned. It's too dangerous. No one should go out during active battle. Mark shook his head. I know the terrain. I can get there fast. Viraya stepped forward. I'm going with him. Dr. Lee hesitated. Are you sure? Yes, Viraya said firmly. I know how the Zentari move. I can help. In the end, they were given permission to go, with strict orders to avoid combat. Mark and Viraya suited up in protective clothing and took a small rover. The drive through the sandstorm was rough. Red dust covered the windshield and lightning cracked across the sky. They reached the crash site just as night fell. The human transport was broken in half, smoke rising from its engines. Mark and Viraya ran toward it. Over here, a voice cried. They found 3 survivors trapped under wreckage. Mark pulled out a cutting tool and worked fast. Viraya lifted metal panels with her strength, ignoring the pain in her side. Why is she helping us? One of the injured soldiers asked weakly. She's not your enemy, Mark replied. She's our only hope right now. It took an hour, but they freed all 3. Suddenly the scanner beeped. Centauri patrol coming, Viraya warned. They must have picked up the beacon too. We don't have time to run, Mark said. We make a stand here. He handed weapons to the injured soldiers, then looked at Viraya. You don't have to fight. I do, she said. Not for them, for the choice I made, for who I am now. The Zentari patrol arrived with drones and rifles, but they didn't expect resistance. Mark, Viraya, and the others held their ground. When the fight ended, the enemy was gone, but so were the last traces of Viraya's past. She had chosen her side not for a flag, not for orders, but for what she believed was right. Back at the station, they were welcomed as heroes. Even the injured soldiers, once afraid of Viraya, now looked at her with respect. Dr. Lee met them at the door. You saved lives today. Mark smiled. So, did she? Viraya's eyes were tired but peaceful. I don't want to go back to war, she said. But I won't run from danger either. Not anymore. Dr. Lee nodded. Then you're exactly who we need. That night under the stars, Mark and Viraya sat on the station roof, watching the sky. Ships still passed in the distance, but the silence between them was calm. I never thought I'd care about someone like you, Viraya said. An enemy? No, a human. Mark chuckled. I didn't think I'd be friends with a Zentari either. Friends, she repeated softly. That's a good word. They sat together, close but quiet. The war wasn't over, but something else had begun. Something deeper than armor, stronger than fear. Trust. A week had passed since the battle at the crash site. The research station on Couldnt 7 had returned to its quiet routine. Scientists studied minerals, doctors treated wounds, and diplomats held meetings in hidden rooms, trying to plan a path toward peace. But for Mark and Viraya, peace was still far away. They sat in the station's central garden, under a glass dome filled with green plants. The earth tree swayed gently in the recycled air and soft music played in the background. This place doesn't feel real, Viraya said. So much green, so much calm. Mark leaned back on the bench. It's real, just rare. She smiled faintly. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Before he could reply, the comm system beeped. Lieutenant Mark Trenner and guest report to the command hall immediately. Mark looked at Viraya. That can't be good. Inside the command hall, several humans stood in uniform. One of them wore high-ranking insignia, a general. Mark saluted. Sir, the general didn't smile. Lieutenant Trenner, and this is the Zentari? Viraya stood tall. My name is Viraya. I don't fight for the war anymore. She saved human lives, Mark added quickly. She risked her life to protect our people. The general looked at them both. That's why you're here. We've been in contact with a group of Zentari leaders who may be open to peace talks, but they won't meet with us directly. Viraya's eyes narrowed. Why not? Because they don't trust us, the general said. But they trust you, You were one of them. Now you're not. Mark stepped forward. You want her to go back? Not alone, the general said. You'll go with her. The room fell silent. Mark and Viraya exchanged a glance. If we go, Viraya said slowly, and they agree to peace. What then? Then this war could finally end, the general replied. Or at least, begin to end. That night, Mark and Viraya stood on the station roof again looking at the stars. You don't have to do this, Mark said. You've done enough. She shook her head. If I turn away now, I'll regret it forever. I used to believe in war. Now I believe in peace. I have to try. Mark touched her arm gently. Then I'm going with you. She smiled. Even if it's dangerous? Especially because it is. The next morning, they boarded a diplomatic shuttle and left the station behind. The journey was quiet. The stars passed slowly outside the window. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. When they reached the meeting point, an old satellite base on a small moon, they saw several Zentari ships already waiting. Viraya adjusted her jumpsuit and took a deep breath. They'll expect me to wear armor. Mark looked at her. You don't need it anymore. She smiled. I know. They entered the base side by side. Inside, several Zentari commanders stood waiting. They were tall, powerful, and fully armored. Their eyes glowed behind their helmets. Viraya stepped forward. One of the commanders tilted his head. You came without armor, without weapons. I don't need them, Viraya replied. I came to speak, not to fight. Why should we listen? Another commander asked. You left us. You walked with a human. I did, she said, proudly. Because I saw the truth. We've been fighting for so long we've forgotten why. There can be no peace with Earth, one of them growled. There can, Mark said, but only if someone makes the first step. The room was tense. For a moment it felt like another battle might begin. Then one of the older commanders stepped forward. His armor was worn, his voice was quiet. I knew you when you were young, Viraya. You were brave, strong. You still are. She bowed her head. Thank you, Commander Saren. You speak of peace, he said. But peace is not just words. It's action, trust, sacrifice. I know, she said. That's why I came. I left everything behind to prove it. Mark stepped beside her. We risked our lives to protect each other. That's not weakness. That's strength. The commanders spoke among themselves in a low, strange language. After several minutes, Commander Saren turned back. We will send messengers to speak with your leaders. A trial conversation. No promises, but a beginning. Mark let out a breath. That's all we ask? Viraya smiled. Thank you. They returned to the research station as quiet heroes. The Earth General met them in the docking bay. You did it, he said. This could be the start of something big. Mark looked at Viraya. She did it. I just followed her. The general turned to her. There may be people who never accept you, but what you did today matters. I didn't do it to be accepted, Viraya replied. I did it because it was right. In the weeks that followed, small peace talks began across the galaxy. No one declared the war over. But there were fewer battles, more conversations, less fear. At the research station, Viraya started working with Dr. Lee, teaching others about Centauri culture. Mark helped with field missions and trained younger officers in survival and compassion. One evening in the garden, Viraya sat with Mark under a glowing tree. She touched a flower petal gently. I used to think armor made me strong. Mark looked at her. And now? She smiled. Now I know that letting someone see you, really see you, is the strongest thing of all. He reached out and held her hand. I saw you. From the moment you said you couldn't breathe. I didn't mean just the armor, she whispered. I meant the weight I carried, the fear, the lies. He squeezed her hand. And now? Now, she said softly, I can finally breathe. The end.